Well, thanks everyone for gathering this evening and just sharing stories and passing on generations of knowledge. So let's get started.
Papa Frank, what was your favorite childhood memory?
We went to town in a wagon with 2 mules, and we'd go to town. It'd take all day. When I can see why now, because I drove in the car, and it's probably about 6, 7 miles. And I'd sit on the back of the wagon, and my mother and dad sat in the front with my older sister. Me and my brother sat on the back of the wagon. We left when I was pretty young. And I worked for OG&E for 30-something years, and traveled all over working for them, ended up superintendent, come back, and at least had never met any of our kinfolks that live at Fillmore. So I took them by there and showed them where we used to live, and some of our kinfolks was sitting out underneath a tree. It was Sunday, if I remember right, drinking tea, and I pulled up there, and of course I knew Jaybird, Jackie, and Jackie said, "Yeah, I remember when y'all used to go by in a wagon, going to town to get groceries." I said, "Yeah, that's every Saturday morning. It'd take all day, but I'd get an ice cream cone after I got through watering the mules, because that's kind of my job." And we was coming back home, Lisa said, "Daddy, they didn't have cars back when you was a kid?" I said, "Yeah, they had cars, but we didn't have no car. And Don didn't have no car either. Y'all didn't have any car either." No. But see, everybody was in the same boat. We didn't have no electricity, no running water. We had a dug well. Thought my grandmother moved to town and had a draw bucket well, and we thought that was really uptown, because you get to pull that handle, you know, and watch the water come out of it. You know, we just had a bucket, and those fish would swim around in it. And I didn't know about drinking that water even then, you know, because you go to school and you had a drinking, you know, water can. And I said something about those fish in it. And they said, "Well, that eats the mosquitoes out of it, keeps the mosquito eggs out of it." So I said, "Oh, okay." But everybody drank out of the same dipper, and I don't know that anybody ever got sick, did they, Don?
No. We'd ride wagons until I was in the 1st grade. So you would have been in about the 3rd.
Yeah, because I was ahead of you.
Yeah, 2 years ahead of me. We rode a wagon my first year, and then the next year is when the first bus ran east of Fillmore.
When I was in the 1st grade, well, I got off at the first stop. And I stayed down there in the creek, and I'd play down there all day, stay hid. And I done that for 3 days, and I got caught. And after they explained it to me better, well, I stayed on the bus, went to school, but but there's a lot of people there, you know, back then. We didn't hardly see nobody. Well, when the bus come back around, he just went by our house where I got off. And I just sitting there looking. And when he gets to the end of the bus ride, I'm still sitting back here in the back, and he said, "What are you doing on here?" And I said, "Well, you didn't stop at my house." Kind of scared me, but he turned around and took me home.
Sissy, what would you ask your grandpa?
What was it like growing up in a house where there was no English, just Chickasaw? I mean,
I didn't know any different, because I spent a great deal of time with my grandpa and my granny here at Kullihoma. All I ever heard was Chickasaw until I was probably about 4 years old or so, and that's before I went to school. And because my grandfather knew that I was going to have to learn English, he actually would take me to Allen. We'd catch that little dinky down the hill here.
What is that?
It's one of those little coaches, except that it doesn't have it. Well, it has an engine on it by itself, so it's kind of like a trolley car nowadays. Or if you would see one of those, that's the way it was. And it was there that I first heard English spoken a lot. But I was young enough, I think I picked up the language a whole lot quicker than my grandparents, because they didn't speak any English. So I tell everybody that I learned to be an interpreter for my grandpa.
Growing up as a youth Chickasaw, did you think you had a disadvantage or advantage during school?
A lot of the older non-Chickasaws or non-Indians were from the South, like Arkansas, Georgia, and Alabama. And they had these prejudices against Indians. That probably lasted while I was in grade school at Fillmore, probably until I was in about the 7th grade. And then by that time, people were getting a lot more educated and had become a lot less, I guess, prejudice in their views. Maybe you were disliked because you were Indian, or there were prejudice or whatever. But one thing, I don't think it ever let many of us be bothered by it. I think,
Well, I don't, not in Tishomingo, I don't, you know, our backfield was all Indians.
yeah, at one
And our
time,
centers, our All-American was Indian. 2 of them was.
I was growing up in high school when Frank was attending Murray College, and he's right. Probably over a third, probably over half the team were made up of Indian
Yeah, they
Indian players, and some of them were All-Americans, very good students.
I can remember what it was like in the way my grandfather was treated when we went to town, and it always stuck with me. And it was only sometime later that I really began to understand there was some racial prejudice towards Indian people, and that had affected me. The reason that stuck with me and the reason I make mention of respect for other people is because of that. I didn't want to treat people that way or be treated that way. So it's just learning a set of principles and morals and about treating others. And I know that's the basic things that I got from my grandparents and I got from my parents. And they're a part of me. My family's been here since the 1860s, here around Kullihoma. And we're still here. But as I said, it was knowing that what I am is because of the way that I was brought up. And hopefully my grandkids are going to be the same way. They know where they came from.
I really didn't have any grandparents, but with my dad, you know, you always said yes, sir, no, ma'am, and I still say that today, and somebody will say something, I said, well, that's the way we was brought up. And I just still say that, and I still think, and I don't like nobody say yeah, and I won't let them office girls say they're bad about saying yeah, this younger generation, or yep. And I always say yes or no, or yes, ma'am, no, sir.
I look back and that's what they gave me, was a set of morals, a set of principles.
One thing they always taught us, don't ever be ashamed of where you came from. Don't ever forget to come back. And don't ever forget that your elders are the ones that guide you in life. And I think growing up in the church was probably the most important things in our lives. We had many people that would look after us, although they were real strict. They still would look after us, and later on acknowledge good things that we would do.
Probably something that you said that's gonna stick with me, especially through, I know college is getting to me, and just knowing that no matter where I go in life, just always stay true to yourself and respect yourself and never forget where you came from. And just always go back to where you come from, no matter how far you go. I know that you'll love us and give us support no matter where we go or how far off we go.
From moving one school to another, I didn't have friends, didn't have family. I was alone. So I was raised in McMillan, so I had to keep my head high, know where I came from, and always have faith in where I went. And that really touched me.
Still doing good.
I'm gonna copy y'all, but when you said don't ever forget where you came from and don't ever forget to come back, that is very important, you know, to never forget our roots and our elders, and by, you know, having a close family that we can always talk to, and, you know, having friends and everyone's all connected. I think it's really important that we never forget our traditions and values. I think that's the most important thing that I've learned. So thank you. Thank you.
One thing I would like to tell you children, in the church, and I don't know if it was the same as where you went, but there was always a sign, endeavor to persevere. And it took years and years for me to understand what that means. And I think that you children will need to learn what that means, because those were words that were given, I think, in the 1860s to Indian tribes when they were suffering a lot of misdeeds. Those are things that will really help guide your life. Learn how to
persevere.
live.
I like
And
it.
it don't matter how. When I first realized when I moved to Norman, and Harry Cheadle, you know Harry Cheadle?
Harry Cheadle.
Coach Harry Cheadle. And I don't know what kind of Indian he was. He never would say anything. But he told me, we lined us up for the mile relay, and he said, if you don't outrun everybody here, I'm going to stomp a mud hole in your so-and-so and kick it dry. And I thought, well, I can't outrun everybody in Norman High School. Well, I outrun every one of them. And I knew right then, it don't matter whether you come from Fillmore, Oklahoma, Purcell, or where you at, you can accomplish whatever you want to accomplish.
Dad's looking at his watch, so I appreciate y'all very much. So, youth, give your elders a hug. Tell them thank you.
Yeah, we don't get
Right
many
now.
anymore.
Okay.
You hug me, Grandpa.
Give me a hug.
Thank you. Thank you.
I gotta get everybody in a photo right here, y'all. All right, 1, 2, 3.